shit person. Chris's company that he owned. So on top of this, he owns a business, but they go bankrupt. So he's got money problems. He's got no wife, but he's still like traveling the world, drinking constantly. Like, I don't know how he does it.
How does he do it?
Chris, according to a psychologist, is, quote, an egocentric man testing the limits to see if he can actually carry out his sadistic fantasies. He treats people with disrespect, considers them to be intellectually inferior to himself. He uses manipulation to fulfill his own needs. That is what a psychologist says about Chris.
Oh, God.
Chris is also the character in a novel called Amok by Krystian Bala. What? Chris is not a real person.
What? You just told us a whole story about a fake person?
You're going to find out why.
Okay. I hope.
And that's my story today, folks. Okay.
Explain yourself.
I told you this was going to start weird.
Okay, I love it. I'm on the edge of my seat.
So Chris is a character in a novel called Amok, A-M-O-K, by Krystian Bala. Krystian is Polish. So Krystian wrote, and it's K-R-Y-S-T-I-A-N, so I think it's Krystian.
I think so.
So Krystian wrote a twisted, violent novel that some people call a masterpiece in 2003. And there is no English translation of this book, so I wasn't able to actually read excerpts, so I depended on other people describing the book. But the descriptions of this book are literally people are like, I started it and put it down. It's not like... I described Chris, I think, very mildly. People said that this book was so violent and vulgar and twisted and violent, they could not read it. Like, this book is horrible, right? So now let me talk about Krystian a little bit.
Yeah.
Krystian was born in Poland in 1973. Could not find a date, just 1973. He was a business owner for a long time. He started and owned an industrial cleaning business. He was even featured in a documentary about business people called Young Money in 1999 when he was just 26.
Wow.
He's a dark-eyed, curly-haired man, slender and handsome. So, like, his friends even called him Amor. That was his nickname because he's just like this dashing, handsome young fella. He chain smoked cigarettes, and he always said he didn't feel like a businessman. He actually wanted to be a professor of philosophy. I promise I'm going somewhere with this.
No, I'm intrigued.
Okay. One last story to tell before I tie it all together. Okay. And this part is true. This is not an excerpt from a book.
Is this Chris? Is this a different novel?
Once upon a time, on a cold December day in 2000, 3 friends were out fishing. It does sound like a book, but it's not. These 3 friends were out fishing when one of them saw something large floating in the water. At first, he thought it was a log, but as it got closer, he noticed hair and realized it was a dead body. So, of course, they call the police, and this is in Poland. The police come and remove the body carefully from the water, and it's the body of a deceased male. There was a noose around his neck, and his hands were tied behind his back. The rope around his neck was the same one used to tie his hands. So he was in some super, like, terrible cradle position. Like, creepy. It was kind of one, super weird.
Yeah.
His body was covered in marks that police knew were from torture. Like, this man was tortured. He had no food in his intestines. So police knew that he had been starved for at least a few days before he was killed. He had fluid in his lungs. So police knew that he was tortured and then put in the river still alive. Eventually, police put a name to the deceased murder victim, 35-year-old businessman Dariusz Januszewski. And it's like we would spell Darius, but it has a Z at the end, which I think is super. But I'm assuming the Z is silent. I don't know. He was from Wrocław, which is a town 60 miles away from where he was found.
Thrown in the river alive. That's horrifying. Either way, it's horrifying. But,
yeah. This is terrible. Let me go for more. Darius had been reported missing by his wife almost a month earlier. He was last seen November 13th, leaving his advertising firm. The police, of course, immediately launch an investigation. They search the river and the surrounding forest for evidence. They question Darius's associates, clients, and of course his wife, question everyone in his life. Police look at his wife closely because the two had known marital problems, but they had actually reconciled and were about to adopt a child. So they cleared the wife, cleared friends, cleared associates, everyone. Darius had no debt, no enemies, no criminal record. Police literally had no leads. The investigation went nowhere, and within 6 months, they had to drop it to move on to new cases.
Aww.
The Polish press dubbed this, quote, the perfect crime because there's no evidence, nothing, like no leads, nothing. So literally all the papers were like, it's the perfect crime. Extra, read all about it.
Read about this perfect crime.
The case stayed cold for years. Then in 2003, Detective Jacek Robalewski, and the Jacek, it's Jacek, it's the Polish version of Jake.
Oh.
Was looking at the old file for Darius, a case that had recently been handed over to him by the local police. This is one of those cases that he was just drawn to. You know, you always hear about those things. You're like, the detective could not let it go.
I feel like we have... Bless you. I feel like we have those as true crime...
aficionados?
Yeah, aficionados. Like, there's a couple cases that I'm obsessed with.
John Benet Ramsey?
For me, yeah. But it's like, people are like, why are you obsessed with it? And you're just like, I don't know. I'm just obsessed with it.
Ask Sarah about Maura Murray.
Yeah. Ask me about Maura Murray or Emma Foboff or someone.
Yeah. Okay. So he was drawn to this case. And this guy's an incredible detective. Other detectives actually would joke that his cases just solved themselves because he solved everything that came his way.
That's cute.
And maybe that's why this one stuck with him, because it could not be solved and it was the perfect crime.
Yeah.
He actually, and I thought this was cool, he studied psychology at the local university because he wanted, when not working, because he wanted to better understand the criminal mind.
Wow.
Which is like really fucking cool.
Yeah. So it was his passion.
Yeah. Jacek had heard of this case, but wasn't super familiar with the details. So he sat down to review the file. Right away, he recognized the level of brutality, like as we all know, likely meant the murder was very personal, rooted in deep anger, passion. You don't torture someone just because normally.
Yeah, it's happened before, but that's very, very, very uncommon.
We've watched Criminal Minds. We're experts.
Yeah. T-shirt.
And what's the what's the other one?
NCIS.
No.
CSI.
Wait, no, it is Criminal Minds.
The one where they're forensic psychologists. Yeah.
Wait, then what's the new show about the FBI? What's that called? Mindhunter. I was getting those two confused. Yeah, I did mean Criminal Minds, but then I thought I was talking about Mindhunter.
But they're essentially the same job, just different times.
Yes. Okay. Detective Jacek reviewed witness statements, including one from Darius's mother that said the day her son disappeared, a man had called. So I guess his mom worked at the advertising firm. Oh. A man had called the firm, wanting advertising services, but was adamant that he would only speak to and meet with Darius. He didn't want to talk to anyone else. Very adamant.
Fishy.
Very fishy. That day, Darius left the office, got my handwriting, around 4 p.m. to meet this man, this unknown man who wouldn't give his name or details to anyone else.
Don't go meet him.
Never. The detective still wasn't sure what to make of this or even know like how many perpetrators were involved. And this was because Darius was a giant, tall man, right? Like, so the detective was like, I don't know if one guy could take him, whatever.
Down.
The receptionist reported at the time, so this is on the police file, that when Darius left the office by foot, 2 men appeared to be trailing him.
2?
Yeah. So the detective still doesn't know what to make of these statements. Over the next few nights, Detective Jacek continued to pull out the file. Like every night he would pull it out, studying every detail. He was obsessed. He noticed that Darius's cell phone had never been found, and he thought maybe he could find it somehow. Like he's kind of grasping at straws, and other people think he's like crazy, but he's a good detective, so letting him do his thing.
Well, and also like if he has the cases that solve themselves, why don't you have a little faith in him and let him do his magic?
Let him do his thing. And this just sounds super far-fetched, right? They didn't find Darius's cell phone, so he's like, maybe I can track it down. So he thinks that maybe it could be traced if someone else is using it because all cell phones have a serial number. And this is like a total shot in the dark, right? This guy disappeared, I don't know, like 10 years ago, and you're like, maybe I can find his cell phone somewhere with a serial number. But shockingly, they found the phone. The serial number was matched to a phone that was sold online at an internet auction site. The seller was, this is the username, Chris B7.
Why?
And this username traced back to Krystian Bala. So Krystian by this time is a well-known author. His book is out. Police actually didn't believe or even assume that he was a murderer. Their first thought was He clearly got the phone from someone else, or he just found it and was selling it. Police literally thought there is no way that a murderer who carried out such a well-planned, perfect crime, quote unquote, would then just fucking sell the victim's phone online, right? That would be foolish. There's no way.
Foolish is our theme. But wait.
Krystian had since left Poland and moved abroad and wasn't easily reachable, right? So police aren't even talking to him, and they're like, no idiot would murder someone and then sell their phone online. Clearly, he just found the phone somewhere.
Yeah.
But Detective Jasek is like, I'm going to look into this guy. So he starts looking into Krystian, and he realized that he had recently published that book, Amok, that I read kind of part of it.
Sounds very scary. I thought it was real, and I was afraid.
So Detective meets the main character, Chris, sadistic, creepy, violent, vulgar Chris. Right away, the detective takes notes of a few interesting items. Chris, the English version of Krystian, is the name used to sell the phone, also the name of the character in the book. The method the victim was killed, the noose around the neck.
Yes.
Same on both. The selling of the knife online at the auction, the selling of the phone online. Both Krystian and Chris were consumed by philosophy, and they had both been abandoned by their wives.
Yeah.
Both had a company that went bankrupt. Both traveled a lot and drank too much. Both stole a statue from a church one day while drinking. I remember reading this, but didn't actually talk about it. So you know how I talked about how Chris stole the statue from the whatever?
Yeah.
So at trial, Krystian's friend goes on stand and tells a very similar story. Like, literally, Chris is Krystian.
He literally just like wrote this book about himself or things he wanted to do or was going to do or had done.
So Detective Jasek gets a bunch of copies of the book and passes them out to all his colleagues, and he assigns everyone, a chapter to read and just power through.
Keep moving.
The story is fascinating. He gives everyone a book, assigns them a chapter to read and compare to the actual murder case.
Oh.
The psychologist I mentioned in the beginning who analyzed Chris is a real psychologist hired by the police. They hired a psychologist to read the book and analyze the character Chris and then compare it to Krystian. So that analyzing thing was like a real psychologist the police brought in. The psychologist said that, the overlap between the characters and novelists that's normal, but this was like super overlap.
Yeah. Yeah. Super overlap.
Yeah. But of course, it's a book. It's not evidence, right? The only actual evidence linking Krystian to Darius is the cell phone auction.
Yeah.
Right? Like they could look at the book all day, but that's not evidence.
Even though it like lays out parts of how the crime happened and like how they're, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So please look into that username, Chris B7, to see what else that username has done on the internet. Turns out this username had expressed interest in buying an item from another online auction 1 month before Darius was murdered. There was a police manual for sale on an auction called Accidental, Suicidal, or Criminal Hanging. The manual told different ways that a noose could be tied around a neck. Police wanted to speak to Krystian, of course, but they knew he was out of the country, and they knew that if they tried to talk to him or people who he knew, he would get spooked and not come back. So at this point, police are kind of playing a waiting game and just waiting for him to come back into the country naturally to visit his family because they don't want to spook him. So eventually he comes back. Police apprehend him as soon as he gets to Poland, and they bring him in for questioning. He says he doesn't know Darius or know of his murder, but he couldn't remember how he got the phone. So after 48 hours, right, how convenient. After 48 hours, they have to let him go. So the detectives look back to Amok to try to figure out, they're like, we need, something's missing, right? We need something else. We don't have a motive. Like, why would he kill this random person?
Yeah, how do you even know him? Like, this is supposed to be a crime of passion, blah, blah, blah.
So they read Amok again, and the thing that stands out over and over is a jealousy theme. In fact, the last line of the book is, quote, "This was the one killed by blind jealousy." So police, after a lot more digging, right? They're like, what is the like they dig and dig and dig. They find out that Krystian's ex-wife had an affair with Darius. And phone records show that Krystian called him over and over and over weeks leading up to his death.
Okay.
And on this, with the motive, police arrested Krystian.
Wow.
So he goes to trial. And of course, the book, even though it's not evidence, is used a lot along with this motive. The trial lasts a few months. He is found guilty and sentenced to 25 years. He never took the stand, and he still to this day maintains